Greetings, this is Bradford Donald Keller Townsend, and this is a forward research report. The 17th of November, 2018 of the Common Era. The alternative media is actually, in my humble opinion, probably even worse than the mass media. There's all kinds of nonsense out there with UFOs, extraterrestrials coming to Earth, and they jump some of the higher viewing stations or channels. They just don't do much fact checking and just throw stuff at the wall that looks like it might be clickbait. That's a term for people who have channels like mine who say sensational things without evidence and good sources, because it's shocking and they get paid for getting clicks. Now this channel, Forward Research, is a public service, true charitable channel, in that I'm trying not to make or sell anything. I have no advertisements on this channel. I don't sell t-shirts or vitamins or anything like that. The United States of America entered the Second World War in December 1941 to fight over non-renewable natural resources with the German Reich and its allies and the Empire of Japan and her allies. The human population during the Second World War was 2,500,000,000 human persons on the planet Earth. The positive result for the United States of America was tons and tons of gold and silver and millions of slaves and mastery of trillions and trillions of dollars of natural resources. Indonesia at that time was a major supplier for the Dutch, the Royal Orange Netherlands Empire of energy, with the United States getting basically control of the colonies of the British, the French, the Dutch, the Portuguese, and others. That was a huge windfall for the United States. And there was gold and silver in banks. There was artwork, oil fields, copper mines, iron ore mines, fleets of ships, all types of material, and billions of man-hours of labor at almost no cost that the United States had access to. And at that time, at the end of the war, they were producing 60% of the world's steel production. And there was all this backlog demand because of the Great Depression. People didn't get to buy the refrigerators and ovens and radios, televisions, fans, all types of appliances. If you had a beauty salon, you wanted more hair dryers. If you were a mechanic shop, you wanted more lifts to lift up cars, more tools. Because of the war, and it was much longer in Europe and in Asia than it was in the United States. It started much earlier in Asia and earlier in Europe. They had gone long periods of time where military production was the priority, and they weren't able to make civilian goods. So this built up a huge amount of demand. Then the United States and Britain, primarily, with their bomber fleets, dropped millions of kilos of high explosives, and particularly phosphorus incendiary bombs, causing huge fires in France, Germany, Japan, and other areas of the Pacific. So there was just huge amounts of destruction. So not only did you have years where no one could buy, Even they had the money to pay for it, but they couldn't buy it because it just wasn't being manufactured. So you had all that latent built up demand. On top of all that, you had huge amounts of destruction. If you've seen photographs of, what happened to some of the cities like Dresden and Nagasaki that were bombed. So the United States and Argentina, Switzerland, in particular, Switzerland per person is the most industrialized country in the world still today. By not being involved in the war and being an industrialized nation, even though a little bit small one, Switzerland was right there by Europe where everything had been smashed, and hadn't got a single bomb dropped on it, and had railway systems and lots of money flow in from people trying to protect their wealth, sending their gold jewelry, their diamonds, and putting it all in Swiss banks. So then they had all that as capital and could go, and then everybody, wanted everything from chocolate to pantyhose to cement to rebuild their chateaus. So the whole there's this huge amount of pent up demand for many years, and the United States not being devastated could switch back over to mostly civilian manufacture of telephones, refrigerators, automobiles, and construction equipment, and tractors for farmers, and combine harvesters. And if you wanted anything, like in my grandparents' generation and great grandparents' generation, following the war or even during the war, you got on waiting lists. If you had a farm like my great grandfather, wanted a new tractor, you may have had plenty of money to pay for it, but you'd have to go to the John Deere dealership, and they didn't allow much importing at that time, and there was heavy tariffs still in place in like 1948, 1950, and you might have to wait 6 months or a year and a half to get your tractor and put down at that time a 10% down payment that was non-refundable, because they didn't want people putting in multiple bids for tractors and then waiting for the first one to get there and then wanting their money back from the four other dealers that they put their money down. So it was that way for almost anything, not just something that's serious like a tractor, to a hair dryer or a good radio. Everything was on wait list orders, and that gave the United States a huge advantage. The actual wealth and capital the United States shot up because we took gold. The Japanese went and scooped up all the gold they can find as they conquered Asia. Then we beat Japan and then took all the gold and never gave it back. And the same in Germany. And with Europe, the Allies went in and scooped up all kinds of treasure as part of their victory. And they have made, finally 50, 60 years after the war, they made a couple of movies about it, but it's still, even though it's pretty much declassified now, they don't really teach that in the schools. Now in 2018, the typical American house is twice as large as it was at the beginning of the Second World War. You can see that in the older cities of the United States, maybe not in Phoenix, Arizona, but in Indianapolis, in Buffalo, New York, Syracuse, New York, places, I've lived in all those places. You can tell where the pre-World War II neighborhoods are, where the ones built in the 1970s, where the ones that were built, in the 2000s. They're just very different. The new houses are always way, way bigger, and not just in this style. They prior to older homes, they used they didn't use central heating and air conditioning, so they were built differently so that you could open large windows and let air through. And they were actually where they were centered and where they were pointing was to have natural cooling in the summer of the homes. And now they don't care how they orient the house, because they're just counting on there being a central air conditioner and and ventilation to be able to cool the house in the summer, and they don't care about where they place the windows and how they situate the house for airflow. The typical home in America now has 4 flat screen TVs. Almost every house has a computer. They all have appliances such as stoves um, and refrigerators. Sometimes they have multiple, and these are just working class homes, like in Charlestown, Boston. Even people. Um, they just have a job with the city that doesn't require a college degree, whether they work as a clerk, sitting at a desk, or they drive a lawn tractor and cut grass for the city parks and do maintenance on some of the buildings. Where they're making $60,000-$80,000 a year in wages, working for the city of Boston or one of the suburb cities. They'll have a house with 4 TVs and 2 or 3 computers and a couple of because they have a wife and children between them all together, and the wife may have an okay job too. So together, even though they're only high school graduates, they might have $100,000 in income between a teenage son working at a restaurant, the wife working as a clerk, and the working as a government employee maintenance man. Take all 3 of those wages, and it could come out to over $100,000. And with that, they buy tablets and multiple computers, multiple TVs. They pay for central air conditioning and central heating in the winter. And they probably have at least 2 vehicles, and one of them might be large, like an SUV or a pickup truck. So we've gone from foraging to farming and to the machine age. And as we went from foraging to farming, the human height of the average person declined, and their health and life expectancy declined, as farming produced a narrower food supply with less variety and less nutrition in it. Just a dandelion out there that you can go eat might have 8, 10, even 20 times the minerals of the greens that you buy at a typical grocery store. So, when they ate plants, they may have had 10, 15, 20 times the nutrition per leaf. The animals had more nutrition. Eating a wild rabbit that you caught in a trap, the meat would have more minerals in it than maybe a chicken breast that you get at the store. So when we went from hunting and gathering to farming, it was a drop down in the quality of lifestyle. People had to work a lot more hours, and they had poor quality food. Then it dropped down even more when we went into the machinery age, and the steam engine took off, and life expectancies fell even further. People that had worked as peasants on farms and shepherds, um, for sheep, for wool, or as drovers is what they called it in Britain, for people who drive the cows around the pastures and then to markets to sell, to butcher, and that kind of thing. The drovers and the shepherds and the peasant farmers and had better food and better quality of life than the people that had to go work in the textile mills that were run off the land um, by the aristocrats of that era. Um, so the alt media, they don't even know the basics of world history and socioeconomics. They don't understand that voting makes no difference at all. It's big business and very wealthy people like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I'm going to put links to videos of mine and other on my video lists and a couple of books that you can go check out at Amazon. You may not purchase them, but I would recommend that you purchase and read them. They're well worth reading. But they don't know things like that. The tar sands of Canada are what's called an energy sink. So you take conventional energy, let's say oil from Saudi Arabia, or oil, there's still conventional wells being drilled in Texas that are not horizontal fracking. They're traditional wells where you may get a 50 energy return, 1 barrel of energy to get it through the refinery only uses 1 barrel of energy, so you get a 51 energy return. The tar sands, by the time everything is, because they have to take steam and put it in pipes and bury the pipes and then blast the steam out under high pressure, then that melts the bitumen tar and it starts to move, and then they have all this advanced technology, then we get this thick tar stuff. So it uses a huge amount of energy. By the time you do all that and build yourself giant dump trucks and take a whole hectare of land maybe to get 1 barrel of end use oil, when you take into account everything that's from paying the employees to building the pipelines to insuring the pipelines and the lawyers and all the lobbyists that have to get paid and everything, and if you assign a Canadian dollar so many joules, like I'm picking a number, 10,000 joules of energy it's worth. If you were to follow the money and see how many Canadian dollars are involved in the tar sands, and there are other ways you could figure out, but it's pretty much an energy sink. And we know that solar voltaics in practical use in Germany and Spain were a disaster, that they ended up over their lifetimes not even producing. But you need at least 4 to 1 ratio of energy return for 1 energy unit put in. You should get at least 4 out. And you're only getting like 2 out of solar voltaics when it's done at large scale, where you have thousands of panels spread out over a field, and then you can't grow food on the field. And then they found out the maintenance on the solar voltaics was way more than they thought. And then you have to worry about hailstorms and things like that can damage and wipe out your whole thing, and you have to redo all the panels. And then you have no electricity while you're replacing the panels. It might take months for the panels to be manufactured and shipped from China or wherever you're getting them from, because they don't make them in Germany or Spain. So it's solar voltaics are an energy sink, the same as tar sands. And horizontal fracturing on net has always lost money, and it hasn't made a profit yet. And if you do the simple math, we claim, and I have a slide for it, of 35 billion barrels. Well, we're producing 10 million a day. So 10 years, that's 3,652, right? 10 times 365, yeah. Then you take that number, 3,652, and times 10 million, well, what do you get? You get over 35 billion. So that's our own energy agency says we only have 35 million barrels. That means we have less than 10, and that's an older number. So we're down to like 9 years of producing oil in the United States, unless they're way off. So you don't hear the alternative media. I saw a guy who gets millions and millions of views, been on there a decade, a former stockbroker, and he was saying that, the whole energy peak oil thing is, it was saved by the fracking industry. And I saw another very popular guy on the internet who's, considered to be a solid, conservative, decent person, was saying that he thought that now we're going to be exporting oil. Well, that's not the case. We still import half of our oil, and in maybe 9-10 years we'll have no oil to use at all because of fracking. We're pumping it out of the ground faster, or all the machinations. It's not really pumping with all the steam and high pressure liquid and all that, but we're just sucking what little we have left out faster. It's like you get a bigger straw, from your jumbo cup when you go to the store. Just because you get a great big cup and you put less ice in it, and you drink it really fast, that doesn't mean the cup had more in it. It just means you're emptying the cup faster. So, and that's what we're doing. We're just putting bigger straws with more suction on them into the ground and sucking up the last of our oil faster. But that doesn't mean that we solved our energy problem. So conventional fossil fuels are sunk into these energy systems a complete lifestyle analysis, which would include planning. Think of all the accountants, the lawyers, the geologists, the computer scientists, all these people that are involved with just planning an oil field or planning a pipeline, and sometimes they don't even ever get constructed. And then you actually do build the pipeline or do whatever type of energy extraction that you're doing, then eventually you have to demolish and then try to recycle everything. And then that can be, if there's been drilling and they've been using toxic chemicals, then the locals could start filing all kinds of lawsuits, and the congressmen and senators, the different big money, big business interests could turn on what they see as a dying industry, and then tell the judges to start letting through law cases that allow big settlements against them when they get to the demolition and recycling stage. So you have to do a whole complete life cycle analysis, including making initial plans that never get implemented, where you're paying all kinds of professionals good consulting fees and salaries for telling you that this is going to be a bad investment, so they cut their losses, maybe in the tens of millions of dollars, and never do that oil field for fracking. They don't buy all that land. They say, well, it's not going to. We haven't been making money at it. We're not, even though we paid lawyers and prospecting geologists and everything a bunch of money, we're just going to cut our losses here and write off those tens of millions of dollars of expenses. So we need to be committed to a future that means less and less and less and less. We should commit and become emotionally strong for a future that's going to have less and less and less and less. And you don't see that hardly at all in either the mass media or the alt media. They seem to think things can just carry on, like they did for them and their grandparents. They aren't accepting the fact that we have the end of fossil fuels, the end of many of the metals, and it's the end of the mechanical industrial civilization. Even though the evidence is all around, they just won't face the facts. So they just tell you to go out and vote and analyze what the Republican Democrats, the Greens, the Libertarians, the anarchists, any of those. There is no political, economic solution to depleting our natural non-renewable resources and over-exploiting our renewable natural resources such as fisheries and forests. There's being a communist, being a libertarian, being an anarchist, syndicalist, none of that is going to give you more oil in the ground. None of that's going to put more iron in the ground or copper, or get the fishing trawlers to quit overfishing the oceans. Maybe that last one, but that probably not, because with so many people hungry and wanting inexpensive food, they're probably going to just keep the trawlers, even using the last, fuel oil is what we call it as sailors, dredging the oceans. Humanity has a carrying capacity deficit. I'll say again, humanity has a carrying capacity deficit. Just like the United States federal government, the Japanese government, the French government have huge deficits, what the term deficit means is, let's say you have the government is spending $2 trillion and they're only bringing in $1 trillion in taxes, so they're short $1 trillion and they're borrowing money. So this year the United States might have near $1 trillion of debt added to the national debt. So this year, let's say there's $900 billion. That is the deficit for 2018 added on to the 21 plus trillion in debt that we already have, plus over $100 trillion in unfunded liabilities. So the average American taxpayer now, if you take everything, all the debt, the average working full-time person, all the senior citizens or retired folks, all the children in school, not counting them or people just working 20 hours a week, but people with about a 40-hour-a-week job, if you take all the debt of the federal government, city, state, local, their own debt, their own mortgage, car, they're more than $1 million per full-time worker in debt per every American working citizen. And that probably includes the illegal people here working, doing roofing and yard work and stuff too, from Central and America and Mexico. And Mexico is part of North America. It's not part of South America. We use, just in the United States, 43,000 pounds of non-renewable natural resources per person. 95% of the inputs into building things that we buy is non-renewable. One of the only things that's renewable is like the wood. We're building a couple of houses to sell, and there's wood in the framing of like the garages. That is a renewable. That's what the other 5% is, but the rest is all non-renewable. For example, the insulation going into the houses, that is non-renewable. We have no choice in becoming sustainable. What I mean by that is you can decide not to be sustainable, but nature and reality will not let it be, because the oil wells will eventually run dry. The mines will eventually will not have the diesel fuel to power their gigantic dump trucks that can hold like 40,000 tons of ore and bring it up from a mine. Eventually, the mines themselves won't have the equipment. They won't be able to purchase it because it won't be manufactured. Then all the copper and tin and zinc and lithium and all these things that go into making a gigantic mining equipment, some of that stuff is running dry or being completely depleted, and they won't be able to make those big machines, and they won't be able to have fuel. That'll be depleted or become so expensive that it makes no sense to operate the mine anymore. It's economically energy, and when they say economic, I tend to think of it as an energy thing and an energy problem, and there just isn't the energy and the raw materials to continue the mining. So we're going through the great transition, and it will be horrifically painful and agonizing. The great transition is going to be horrifically painful and excruciatingly painful and agonizing, and probably billions of people are going to pass, and the human average life expectancy may drop by decades. The reason nobody wants to go and live like the Amish and Hutterites do and the Mennonites here in Indiana and Pennsylvania and places like that is they like having their heating and their central air conditioning, and they don't want to go out and get their hands dirty and get soil under their nails and to shovel out the barn's manure of the horses and the cows and pigs and all that kind of physical work. And if you look at the Amish, who I've had intimate relations with, and I mean that as in a business way, because I've had a lot of Amish who've worked for me. They have great big hands. They're like twice as big as mine, even if they're shorter than I am, because of doing, even though I've done a lot of physical labor in my life compared to most people, just because I like it, they have no choice. So the Amish have these great big, like mutant hands, and they have all kinds of physical injuries by the time they're in their 50s, like I am, from doing, starting as 4 or 5 years old doing chores. By the time they're 54, 55, now their bodies are starting to fall apart from all that, lifting hay bales and shoveling manure and, riding around on horses and being at odds, and dealing with horses. They can, even good horses, well, once in a while, they're big and strong, and Even if you got a good horse that you see as your buddy, that horse can mess you up. You know? And we're going to be going back to the horse age, and people haven't gone back to subsistence type agricultural horse traction powered farming is because they like the lifestyle. And what's going to go away with mechanical civilization? A lot of medicine, batteries, transportation, um, things you just take for granted, like a good window for your house. That's fairly high tech. You have a triple vacuum window made out of high tech materials. A lot of that stuff won't be around. You'll have to go back to a simple window that's like made from melting glass bottles or something, and you can't really even see through it. It's opaque, and that's the best window you can get, and it doesn't hold the heat or the cold in or out the way you want it to. Um, so there is no realistic hope for a higher standard of living than we have now, and that is not a realistic goal. And continuing to try to push the economy to grow, the global economy or just the United States economy, just like I talked about the oil, we're just getting rid of our last 45 billion barrels and burning them faster using high technology and taking oil from other countries and importing it here and then using it to pump oil out of our shale or out of our tar sands, our bitumen up in Canada. So it's antimony, which is used for battery, transportation, glass, and ceramics. It's happening now. Just like Yemen is a disaster, Yugoslavia is a disaster, Bangladesh is a horrible mess, Afghanistan's a horrible bloody mess, and we're dropping record amount of bombs there, trying to keep control of Afghanistan. I think we dropped more in 2018 than we dropped any other year in Afghanistan. So, and that costs a lot of money. We make a lot of those bombs here in Indianapolis. And then out in Northern California and other places. That that's our trajectory. Just like antimony, they and I got a quick slide on that. They're not able to meet demand. The mines aren't able. No matter what the price is, and then of course they can't just charge whatever they want, but they just can't meet the demand and of the industrial business. The IEEE, that's the professional association for the electrical engineers around the world, simply says there's not enough copper in the Earth's crust for global development of all of the world's countries up to like a Western European, North American standard. You couldn't get to all of the copper in the Earth's crust. It would be economical, but even if you could, it still wouldn't be enough to build electrical power grids that would cover the entire planet. All the islands, all of South America, getting into the poor areas of countries like Ecuador and the poor areas of the Congo and Central Africa and into Bangladesh and into the Eurasia there, like Tajikistan and Turkmenistan. If you're going to wire and build roads and the infrastructure like you have in France and the United States and Canada and Australia, if you want to do that to the whole planet, there's just simply not the materials to do it. So we've already hit the peak, and we're moving the other way. 741 million tons of iron ore is all that's remaining. And last year, well, no, pardon me on that one. Last year we used, and I have a slide, 1,689,000,000 tons of steel. And there's about 27 billion potential tons remaining, and that's probably too high. So you can do the math there, and about every year there's been an increase In 1950, we only used 189 million tons. Then we went up to 1.6 billion. And the International Steel Institute says there's probably 27 billion tons remaining to be produced, and then we'll be out. Lester Brown said 10 years ago in one of his last books, he's retired now, that there was if there was only 2% growth in steel usage, that we would be out in 50 years. Well, now that he did that book over 10 years ago, so that gets you down to 40 years. But the steel consumption hasn't been 2% a year increase, it's been 6. So it's kind of the same thing as oil. Just because we're doing these bumper crop level of steel production doesn't mean that, and the prices are relatively affordable, doesn't mean that doesn't get rid of the depletion problem. That doesn't create more iron ore, and people that are informed, such as the Bradford Grandmaster Knight, with anybody who's a senior executive at a large corporation like General Electric, General Motors, ExxonMobil, Microsoft, any large corporation, and you become like a full vice president and you're in charge of a section and a bunch of people and resources, lots of people and resources, they do strategic plans, whether it's the United States Navy, the German Army, Mercedes-Benz. They want to know how much steel is going to, and lithium for their batteries for their electric cars they're coming out with is going to be out there, and they all know that they see this coming. And that's part of the problem with steel, is that they're not opening mines up because there's big price fluctuations, and it's kind of jockeying musical chairs. They want to keep the thing going for as long as they can, but they don't want to be fools and go out there and build a new oil refinery for billions of dollars, and then the oil starts drying up and the refinery can only run at 40% capacity because they can't get petroleum to refine for their refinery. So like the Rockefellers don't want to build, and for a long time haven't built any more refineries. There hasn't been a major refinery built in the last 10 years, I think. So that's the reality. And these alternative media people, most of them, there is a couple, and I will name a positive name, and that's Chris Martenson. He makes excellent videos, and he's able to deal with reality. I think it's called Prosperity something, but I'm just talking off the cuff here. So there are a few good people out there that are engaged with reality. Like Chris has a Ph.D. in biology and an MBA from one of the higher ranked business schools. I don't Cornell or somewhere. I don't know which one it is, but it's one of the top 50 at least. Business, well, not that the rankings necessarily mean a whole lot, but mostly it's just the publishers that own the different rating services pick their favorite schools but that they went to, or their kids or friends went to, or whatever, and put them higher up, because it's really a subjective thing. But the thing is, he does have a business degree, and from at an advanced level that requires some advanced math, and then he has a biology degree and has been also an executive at a substantial corporation of a high rank. So he's aware of these problems and has been educating people about it and how to prepare. I am of the preparing is going to be very, very difficult. As if you're known to be a prepper, then you kind of make yourself a target. So you really need to, if you are going to be prepping, because it could end any day. This is all a confidence game, and because we have fiat currency, and we tell Vietnam you can't have steel mills and railroads and big universities and all the things that we have, because we're not going to give it to you. There's not enough to go around, and even though our money is worth nothing, we're not going to from nothing. It's not backed by gold or silver or like it's supposed to be by the Constitution. We could just type on our computer and give you billions of dollars, and then you could buy John Deere, but you have to buy only things from us. So we'll sell you concrete, steel. We'll sell you tractors and things. We'll sell you thousands of medical textbooks so you can have medical schools and things like that. But we'll just print money out of nothing, give it to you, then you can buy stuff from us, and that creates jobs here. We could do that, but we don't, because there just isn't enough to go around. And that's part of what they do at these big international meetings like Davos, Switzerland, or Bilderberg and things, is figure out there's only a pie and there isn't enough pie for everyone. And then we're going to cut up these pies we have, and the UK gets a nice big slice, France gets a big slice, Switzerland gets a really big slice, the United States gets a whole pie, you know. But then that's what they do, and then they decide, well, Paraguay, you're not getting much. Bangladesh, you're not getting anything. Vietnam, you're not getting anything. Tajikistan, you're getting nothing. That's the way the world really works. This has been a long one, but I hope it's been informative for you. And don't take anything I say. Go do your own research and discover the facts, because they're there to be had. And I'm putting the resources in the comment section so that you can confirm what I'm saying, because they in turn have connections to more resources and more facts. Or you can spend a few dollars on the books and have them overnighted to you. And they are full of all the sources and where all the websites and where you go in the library to get the facts. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day.